My name is Ann Dicker, and when I was 17, my life was, to be honest, pretty perfect. Not in a princess life kind of way, but in the sense that I had everything a girl my age could want. Loving parents, a younger brother who was my best friend, a comfortable home in the Boston suburbs, and the certainty that the future was a red carpet rolled out, waiting for me. My father, Eric, was a renowned builder, specializing in luxury homes. He worked hard, spent hours on construction sites, but always came home with a tired smile and the satisfaction of someone who built dreams. My mother, Amanda, was our family's anchor, a warm and practical woman who transformed our house into a haven of laughter and the smells of home-cooked food. And my brother, Josh, 13 years old, was the personification of energy and curiosity, always with a new invention or a philosophical question on the tip of his tongue. It was a Tuesday evening, and the scene was as typical as any other. The four of us were sitting at the dinner table, the soft light from the hanging lamp casting a glow over my mother's lasagna, and the aroma of basil and cheese filled the kitchen. Josh was telling me about a new video game he desperately wanted, and I, as the responsible older sister, was giving my usual lecture about the importance of studying before playing. My dad and mom exchanged amused glances, accustomed to our dynamic. "But Anne, it's a strategy game," Josh argued, his mouth full of lasagna. "It helps develop logical thinking." "And I'm the Queen of England," I retorted, rolling my eyes but with a smile. "Finish your homework, Your Majesty." It was at that exact moment, as my dad was laughing at our little dispute, that the phone rang. It wasn't the kind of ring we ignored. It was the kitchen landline, the one that only rang for important calls, or, more often, for my grandmother, Emma. My mom made an amused face. "Must be Grandma Emma, wanting to know if the lasagna is good," she joked, as my dad got up to answer. We called her Grandma Emma, but she was more than a typical grandmother. She was a force of nature, a woman who, despite her age, lived with a vigor and luxury that always fascinated me. She lived in an exclusive condo in Miami, spent winters in Aspen, and summers on a yacht in the Mediterranean. All of this, according to her, thanks to the smart investments my grandfather, her late husband, had left. My father, Eric, never got involved in his mother's financial affairs. He always said that his father had left Emma a good sum and that she deserved to enjoy life. He, with his success in construction, never needed the inheritance money himself. But, to be honest, my father always had a tiny bit of distrust regarding my grandmother's abundant life. I once overheard him talking to my mother years ago, when I was a child and didn't quite understand. "Amanda, I don't know how Mom manages to maintain this lifestyle just with my father's retirement and those investments. They were good, yes, but not that good." He shook his head thoughtfully. My mother, always more pragmatic, would just reply, "Eric, your mother has always been very smart with money, and your father was a provident man. Maybe she just knows how to live well." I never paid much attention to those conversations. To me, Grandma Emma was the personification of glamour, a woman who sent me expensive gifts and told me stories of her exotic travels. She was living proof that life could be an endless adventure. But that night, my father's laughter died in his throat. His face, previously relaxed, turned pale, and his eyes widened. He gripped the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. My mother and I exchanged glances, the smiles vanishing from our faces. Josh, noticing the abrupt change in the atmosphere, stopped eating and looked at us, confused. "Mom?" my father said, his voice almost a whisper, but with an intensity that sent a chill down my spine. "Where are you?" There was a long pause, filled only by the muffled sound of my grandmother's voice on the other end of the line. With each word she spoke, my father's face contorted into a mixture of disbelief and horror. He closed his eyes for an instant, as if wishing to erase what he was hearing, and then opened them again, fixing his gaze on a random spot on the wall. "Arrested?" he repeated, the word coming out as a groan. "By the FBI? Mom? What are you talking about?" My mother stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair in the process. The sound echoed in the silent kitchen. She rushed to my father's side, taking the phone from his trembling hand. "Emma?" What happened? My mother's voice was firm, but I could see the tremor in her hands. Josh and I stood up too, paralyzed. Dinner, the lasagna, the jokes, everything seemed to have happened in another life. The reality that now imposed itself was cold and frightening. I saw my mother's face turn as white as my father's. She listened, her eyes fixed on a distant point, and then, with a heavy sigh, she hung up the phone. She turned to us, her eyes moist, but with an expression of shock that surpassed any sadness. "Grandma Emma, she's been arrested," my mother said, her voice choked. "She's at the FBI headquarters, in Miami." Josh let out a small, muffled gasp. "Arrested? Why? What did she do?" he asked, his eyes wide, his childhood innocence clashing with the harsh reality. My mother looked at my father, who was sitting again, his head in his hands, his shoulders slumped. He seemed to have aged 10 years in a matter of seconds. She was caught in a pyramid scheme," my mother continued, her voice almost inaudible. "With 2 other elderly women. They were scamming other retirees. Online. The air in the kitchen seemed thin. I felt as if I were underwater, unable to breathe. Grandma Emma? The woman I idolized, who was the personification of glamour and success? A criminal? The idea was so absurd it felt like a nightmare. But my father's face, the pain in his eyes, told me it was all too real. The perfect life I knew had just crumbled into a million pieces, and I knew that from that moment on, nothing would be the same. Grandma Emma's web of lies had finally unraveled, and we were next to be caught in it. The night that followed Grandma Emma's phone call was a blur of anxious whispers and heavy silences. My parents spent hours in the office, their voices muffled by the closed door, while Josh and I stayed in the living room, watching a movie that no one was truly seeing. With every sound, every movement, I felt a shiver. The image of Grandma Emma, with her pearl necklaces and confident smiles, mingled with the idea of her being interrogated by the FBI. It was surreal, grotesque. The next morning, breakfast was a somber ritual. My parents had deep dark circles under their eyes and red eyes. My father, Eric, looked like a ghost. He barely touched his toast. "What's going to happen now?" I asked, my voice sounding small and fragile in the silence of the kitchen. My father sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I'm going to Miami today. I need to see Mom, understand what happened, hire a lawyer." My mother, Amanda, placed her hand over his. "I'm coming with you. I can't let you go through this alone." Josh, who had been silent until then, asked, "Is she going to jail?" The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. No one wanted to answer it, but the truth was there, looming over us. My father just shook his head, unable to verbalize what we were all thinking. In the days that followed, our house, once a haven of joy, transformed into a crisis headquarters. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. There were lawyers, journalists, even some of Grandma Emma's friends, all shocked and confused. The news spread like wildfire, and suddenly, we were the Dicker family, the one whose grandmother was involved in a pyramid scheme scandal. I started to feel the stares at school, whispers in the hallways, curious glances. My best friend Chloe tried to support me, but I felt there was an invisible barrier between us. How could I explain that my grandmother, the woman I admired so much, was a criminal? The shame was a constant weight on my chest. One afternoon, I was in my room trying to study, but my mind was blank. Josh came in, sitting on the edge of my bed, with an unusually serious expression for him. "Anne, do you think Grandma is a bad person?" he asked, his voice low. I looked at him, at the innocence in his eyes, and felt a lump in my throat. "I don't know, Josh. I really don't know. It's all so confusing," he sighed. "I liked it when she sent me those expensive games, and when she took me for ice cream." That comment hit me. Grandma Emma was generous, yes, but now I wondered where all that generosity came from. Was it money from other retirees? People who, like her, should have been enjoying a peaceful life. The image of a plastic flower, beautiful on the outside but lifeless on the inside, began to form in my mind. Grandma Emma's life was a plastic flower, and we were about to discover that it had no scent at all. My father and mother returned from Miami a week later, exhausted and with grim expressions. They sat with us in the living room, and I knew the conversation would be difficult. "Grandma's situation is very serious," my father began, his voice hoarse. "She and the two other women, one named Dorothy and another named Beatrice, set up a sophisticated scheme. They promised extremely high returns on fake investments and used money from new investors to pay old ones, creating the illusion of profit." My mother added, her voice full of sadness, "They targeted retirees, people who had a lifetime of savings and were looking for extra security. Some lost everything, Anne. Everything." I felt a chill run down my spine. The dimension of the cruelty hit me hard. It wasn't just a legal issue. It was a moral one. A betrayal of trust. "What about the other two women?" Josh asked. "Dorothy and Beatrice are older than Mom, and seem to have been the initiators of the scheme," my father explained. "But Mom was actively involved, recruiting people, managing accounts. The FBI has irrefutable proof. The life we knew was unraveling before our eyes. Grandma Emma's luxury, the expensive gifts, the exotic trips. It was all smoke and mirrors, built on the ruin of other lives. The foundation of our own security, the stability my father had built with so much sweat, now seemed shaken by this revelation. I looked at my father, at the man who had always been my safe harbor, and saw the pain and disappointment in his eyes. He had let his mother live her life, trusting she would do what was right, and now that trust had been spectacularly broken. Control of the situation was completely out of our hands, and the only thing we could do was watch as the house of cards collapsed. This story is deeply personal to me, O'Dare, and if you've ever felt the ground shake beneath your feet because of a family secret, or if you've identified with the feeling of seeing a perfect image shatter, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. Where are you watching from? Your perspective is very important to me. News of Grandma Emma's arrest and the pyramid scheme scandal soon reached local news outlets and then national ones. Suddenly, the Dicker family's life, once so discreet and respected, was in the spotlight. Photographs of Grandma Emma smiling at gala events with her characteristic pearl necklace were displayed alongside sensational headlines. The name Dicker became synonymous with scandal. At school, the situation became unbearable. Whispers turned into open comments, curious glances into silent judgments. I tried to ignore it, but it was like trying to ignore gravity. One day during lunch, I was sitting with Chloe, my best friend since childhood, and a group of classmates. The conversation revolved around the latest rumor, and suddenly, a girl named Tiffany, who had always harbored a hint of envy for my perfect life, dropped the bomb. "I heard Anne's grandmother stole my great-aunt's retirement savings," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "She lost all her savings." An awkward silence settled over the table. I felt my face burn. Chloe tried to intervene. "Tiffany, that's not fair. You don't know the details." But Tiffany didn't stop. "I know enough. People like her grandmother deserve to rot in jail. And her family? Well, they must have benefited from all this, right?" I stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. My eyes were welling up with anger and humiliation. "You don't know what you're talking about, Tiffany," I shouted, my voice choked. "Oh, I don't?" she retorted with a cynical smile. "Your grandmother is a criminal, and you're her granddaughter." At that moment, I felt a rupture. Not just with Tiffany, but with the idea that my life could go back to normal. I looked at Chloe, expecting her to defend me, but she just lowered her eyes, uncomfortable. That silence, the lack of support, hurt more than Tiffany's words. I ran out of the cafeteria, tears streaming down my face, and didn't return to school that day. The loss of an ally, or the perception of their absence, was a painful blow. At home, the tension was palpable. My father was consumed by meetings with lawyers and attempts to protect his reputation and that of the company. He was losing contracts, and the flow of money, once so abundant, was starting to dwindle. I overheard him one night in the office, talking to my mother, his voice full of despair. "Amanda, clients are backing out. They don't want to associate their luxury projects with a scandal like this. My name is being dragged through the mud. My mother, always the voice of reason, tried to calm him. We'll get through this, Eric. You're an honest man. People know that. But Mom? He sighed. His voice choked. How could she do this? I trusted her. I let her take care of everything. I remembered the conversations from years ago. My father's subtle distrust regarding Grandma Emma's luxurious life. He had distanced himself from her finances out of a mix of respect and, perhaps, an intuitive discomfort. Now, that decision, which seemed so innocent at the time, had turned into a source of guilt and regret. One afternoon, while I was helping my mother organize documents in the office, I found an old box of photos. In one of them, my father, still young, was next to Grandma Emma and my grandfather. My grandfather, a smiling man with kind eyes, held a stock certificate. Your grandmother and grandfather were very proud of those investments, my mother said, noticing my gaze. Your grandfather worked his whole life to build them. He wanted your grandmother to have a comfortable life. I looked at the photo, at Grandma Emma's smile, so genuine and happy. It was hard to reconcile that image with the woman who was imprisoned, accused of stealing from others. The complexity of the situation suffocated me. I couldn't understand how someone could change so much, or if the person I knew was just a facade. The truth, I knew, was much darker than I could imagine, and I felt we were only scratching the surface of a well of secrets. The Dicker family's life turned into a labyrinth of uncertainties. My father was increasingly stressed, losing weight and the sparkle in his eyes. My mother tried to remain calm, but I saw the worry etched on her face. Josh, my brother, had retreated into his world of video games, an escape from reality that I understood perfectly. I myself felt as if I were walking on a minefield, each step uncertain, each interaction a potential explosion. Grandma Emma's house in Miami, that paradise of luxury I so admired, had been sealed by the FBI. But before that, my parents were allowed to retrieve some personal belongings. They brought back some boxes, full of old photos, jewelry, and some sentimental items. As my mother and I organized these boxes, trying to find something that could help with the case, I came across a small carved wooden box, hidden at the back of a cabinet. It wasn't a jewelry box, nor a photo box. It was a simple box, with an aged bronze clasp. My mother was distracted with some documents, so I opened it. Inside, I found a leather-bound diary with the initials EMD engraved in faded gold, Grandma Emma's diary. My heart pounded. I knew I was invading her privacy, but the curiosity was overwhelming. I needed to understand. I needed to know. I started flipping through the pages, dated more than 20 years ago, even before I was born. The first entries were about her life with my grandfather, Silas. They were full of love, plans, a simple and happy life. But then, the tone began to change. The entries became darker, more anxious. Silas is becoming more and more distant. The investments he was so proud of are proving to be unstable. He doesn't want to tell me everything, but I see the fear in his eyes. He's losing money, and a lot of it. I kept reading. My breath caught in my throat. The pages revealed a story my father had never told, or perhaps never knew. My grandfather, Silas, wasn't just a provident man. He was also a man who, in his later years, had gotten involved in some risky investments, trying to multiply the family fortune. And he had failed, catastrophically. He lost almost everything. What's left will barely keep us going for a few years. I don't know what to do. Silas is sick, and guilt is consuming him. He made me promise I would never tell Eric. He doesn't want our son to know he failed. My eyes widened. So, Grandma Emma's luxury didn't come from my grandfather's smart investments. It came from a lie, from a facade she maintained to protect her husband's memory and the family's image. But how did she manage to maintain this lifestyle for so long if the money was running out? I kept reading, and that's when I found the entry that sent a cold shiver down my spine. It was from about 10 years ago. I met Dorothy and Beatrice. They seemed so kind, so understanding. They told me there's a way to recover what Silas lost. A unique opportunity, with incredible returns. I know it's risky, but what else can I do? The house is mortgaged, and Eric can't know. I need to protect Silas's image. I need to protect my family's future. That was the plot twist. Grandma Emma wasn't the mastermind behind the scheme, nor the sole villain. She had been, at first, a victim, or at least someone desperate enough to get involved in something that seemed like a magical solution. Dorothy and Beatrice, the other two elderly women involved, weren't just accomplices. They were the predators, and Grandma Emma had fallen into their clutches. She had been deceived, and in her desperation, she had become a deceiver. I felt a mix of anger and pity. Anger for the lies, for the web of deceit she had woven. Pity for the woman who, to protect a facade and a memory, had destroyed her own life and the lives of so many others. Just then, my father walked into the office, his eyes tired, but with a new determination. "Anne, did you find anything?" he asked, noticing the diary in my hands. I looked at the diary, at Grandma Emma's words, at the secret she had kept for so long. I knew this information would change everything. It wasn't just about a pyramid scheme. It was about a story of love, loss, desperation, and a terrible choice. I held up the diary, my eyes fixed on my father's. "Dad, I think I found Grandma Emma's true story, and it's nothing like we imagined." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with a truth that was about to explode and redefine everything we thought we knew about our family. The revelation from Grandma Emma's diary hit my father like a lightning bolt. He took the book from my hands, the pages trembling slightly as he flipped through them, his eyes scanning his mother's words. My mother, Amanda, who was in the kitchen, noticed the tense silence and came into the office, her eyes questioning. "What happened?" she asked, sensing the gravity of the moment. My father looked up from the diary, his face a mixture of shock, sadness, and contained anger. "Mom, she wasn't just the swindler, Amanda. She was deceived first. My father, Silas, he lost almost everything before he died. She was trying to recover what he lost, to protect his memory, to protect us." My mother brought a hand to her mouth, shocked. I explained what I had read. The story of Grandpa Silas's risky investments, Emma's promise never to tell Eric, her desperation as the money ran out, and finally, her encounter with Dorothy and Beatrice, the true architects of the scheme. The initial shock gave way to a wave of complex emotions. My father sat heavily in the chair, the diary on his lap. "I can't believe it," he murmured, his voice choked. "My whole life I thought he had been so provident. And Mom, she carried this burden alone for decades. That doesn't justify what she did, Eric," my mother said, her voice soft but firm. "She still deceived and stole from other people. But it explains it. The truth was a burden, but also a liberation." Grandma Emma wasn't just a one-dimensional villain. She was a complex woman, driven by love and loyalty, but who had gotten lost in a labyrinth of lies and terrible choices. The next step was inevitable, a meeting with Grandma Emma. Her lawyer secured special permission for a longer family visit in prison before the trial. The trip to Miami was different this time. It was no longer about luxury and vacations, but about confrontation and painful truths. Josh stayed home with an aunt, as my parents felt he was too young for what was to come. When we entered the prison visiting room, the smell of disinfectant and despair hung in the air. Grandma Emma sat at a metal table, wearing an orange uniform. She looked smaller, more fragile, without her pearl necklaces and elegant dresses. Her white hair was disheveled, and her eyes, once so full of sparkle, were dull and tired. She saw us, and a weak smile tried to form on her lips, but failed. "Eric, Amanda, Anne," she said, her voice hoarse. My father sat across from her, the diary in his hands. "Mom, I read this," he said, his voice firm, but with a hint of pain. "Why did you never tell me? About Dad? About everything?" Grandma Emma lowered her eyes, her hands clasped on the table. "I didn't want you to know your father failed. He was such a proud man. And I wanted to keep his image intact for you. For everyone. But you got involved in a pyramid scheme, Mom," my father exploded, his voice laden with frustration. "You stole from people who trusted you. People like you, retirees." Tears began to stream down Grandma Emma's face. "I know, Eric. I know. I regret it every day. Dorothy and Beatrice, they promised me I would get everything back, that no one would get hurt. They said it was a form of justice for what Silas had lost. I was so desperate. I convinced myself I was doing the right thing, that I was protecting the family. But I lost myself." I moved closer to the table, looking at my grandmother. "Grandma, Tiffany from my school. Her great-aunt lost all her savings. Did you know you were hurting people?" She looked up at me, her eyes filled with pain. "I didn't want to, Anne. I swear I didn't. I convinced myself they were just numbers, that the money would come from somewhere. I became blind to the promise of recovering what I thought was rightfully ours. I became a monster." The confrontation was bitter, painful, but necessary. There were no hysterical shouts, but the ache of unspoken truths and wrong choices hung in the air. My father, despite his anger, now seemed to understand the complexity of the situation. Grandma Emma wasn't just a criminal. She was a broken woman, trapped in the consequences of her own lies and a desperation that pushed her to the edge. The path to redemption would be long and difficult, and the Dicker family was just beginning to understand the true cost of the web of lies Grandma Emma had woven. The prison visit and the confrontation with Grandma Emma left a deep mark on all of us. The truth, however painful, had been unearthed, and with it, a new understanding of the motivations behind Emma's actions. It wasn't a justification, but an explanation that added layers to the tragedy. In the following months, the legal process dragged on. Grandma Emma cooperated with the FBI, providing crucial information about Dorothy and Beatrice, who were arrested shortly after. The trial was a media spectacle, and our family was dragged into the spotlight again. My father, Eric, had to testify, and it was excruciating to watch him relive the pain of betrayal. Grandma Emma was sentenced to a significant prison term, but with the possibility of parole due to her age and cooperation. She accepted the sentence with a melancholic resignation, seeming to finally find a strange peace in accepting the consequences. As the legal drama unfolded, our family's life was under reconstruction. My father had lost several important contracts, and the construction company, though still solid, needed to undergo restructuring. He worked tirelessly to restore his reputation, and my mother, Amanda, was his rock, supporting him every step of the way. They had to sell some assets, including our beach vacation home, to cover legal expenses and help pay part of the restitutions to the victims, even though they were not legally obliged to do so. It was a matter of principle for my father. Josh and I also had to adapt. The teasing at school lessened over time, but the shadow of the scandal still lingered. I grew closer to Josh, and our relationship strengthened. We became a team, facing the world together. One afternoon, I was talking to my mother in the kitchen while she prepared dinner. "Mom, do you think Grandma will truly regret it?" I asked, still struggling to process everything. My mother sighed, stirring the pot. "I believe so, Anne. Desperation led her down a wrong path, but she is your grandmother. She made terrible mistakes, but I believe deep down, she is still the woman who loved your grandfather and wanted to protect the family. Regret is a long road. And Dad? Has he forgiven her?" My mother turned to me with a sad smile. "Forgiveness is a process, Anne. It doesn't happen overnight. But he understands. And that's a start. He's dealing with the pain in a way I never thought I'd see. He's opening up more, talking about your grandfather, about the pressures he felt. It's as if this crisis somehow brought us closer, even if it broke us first. I realized that the crisis had, in fact, broken us, but it had also remade us. The image of the perfect family had been shattered, but what remained was more real, more honest. My father, once so focused on work and image, was learning to be more vulnerable, to share his pains. My mother, always strong, proved even more resilient. And Josh and I, once living in our teenage bubble, had been forced to mature, to understand the complexities of the adult world and the consequences of choices. Liberation did not come from an acquittal, but from the truth. The truth about Grandpa Silas, the truth about Grandma Emma, and the truth about ourselves. The web of lies had been unraveled, and although the scars remained, the foundations of our family were being rebuilt, this time on a basis of honesty and resilience. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we had each other, and that was what truly mattered. Years passed, and the dust from Grandma Emma's scandal finally began to settle. Life, with its incredible ability to move forward, pushed us towards a new horizon. Grandma Emma served her sentence, and when she was released from prison, she was a transformed woman. The pearls and glamour had been replaced by a quiet humility and a genuine desire to make amends with the past. She moved to a small apartment in a neighboring city, far from the Miami spotlight. My father, Eric, took time to rebuild his relationship with her. Visits were initially tense, filled with silences and unspoken words. But over time, and with Grandma Emma's persistence in demonstrating her remorse and her desire to change, the wounds began to heal. She never again tried to live a life of luxury, dedicating herself to volunteer work at a senior center, ironically, helping those she had once harmed. My family also found its new life. My father rebuilt his company, not just with the financial success of before, but with a new ethic, a focus on integrity and community. He became an advocate for financial education for seniors, using his own painful experience to help prevent other families from going through what we did. My mother, Amanda, continued to be the silent force behind everything, the glue that held our family together. Josh and I grew up. He graduated from college with a degree in engineering, still with his passion for technology, but with a maturity that the scandal had forced upon him. I, Anne, followed my own path. The trauma of that period made me want to understand people, their motivations, the complexities of the human mind. I majored in psychology, with the goal of helping those who feel lost, who find themselves at difficult crossroads, or who need a voice to unravel the webs of their own lives. One afternoon, years after the incident, I was visiting Grandma Emma in her small apartment. She offered me a cup of tea and showed me a simple necklace she had made in a craft class. They weren't pearls, but small, colorful wooden beads. "It's simple, isn't it?" she said with a genuine smile. "But it's mine. And it was made with my own hands." I smiled at her. That was the true Grandma Emma, the woman who had gotten lost and found herself again. The plastic flower had withered, but a new flower, more authentic and resilient, had been reborn from its ashes. The liberation we experienced was not a single event, but a continuous process. Liberation from shame, from anger, from unrealistic expectations. Liberation from the need to keep up appearances. We learned that true wealth is not in jewels or yachts, but in honesty, resilience, and the unconditional love that binds us. My story is about how a family can be broken by a secret and rebuilt by the truth. It's about forgiveness, redemption, and the discovery that, even in the greatest adversities, we can find the strength to flourish again. If you've made it this far, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for accompanying me on this journey. If this story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar, or if it inspired you in any way, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your own experiences, and who knows, your ideas might inspire our next story. Gratitude is a feeling that connects us, and I am immensely grateful to have you all here.